On Tech News Today, Reddit's new CEO is planning a crackdown. Facebook is replacing newspapers, and the Commodore PET is back. And this time, it's an Android phone. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Wednesday, July 15th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by Prosper. Prosper is a peer-to-peer lending marketplace that connects people who are looking to borrow money with those who have money to lend. Visit prosper.com/twit and receive a $50 Visa gift card when you get a loan. And by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for a simple payment solution, check out Braintree. With one simple integration, you can offer your customers every way to pay. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. My name is Mike Elgin. Our co-anchor today is ZDNet contributing writer Kevin Toffel. Kevin, I would like to wish you a happy Amazon Prime Day.
There's nothing happy about it in my book. It's these deals. Some of these deals have been really fantastic, but they are going super quick. And I'm really irked by the whole Amazon Echo thing because they dropped the price to $129.99, and normally it's $179.99. I passed on it when it was $99.99. No problem. That's my bad. But then Amazon said, well, now you can get it for $149. This is a few months ago. So I reserved it. Never got it. Then they just publicly put the product out there, regardless of who had reserved it, and now I'd have to pay $190 or $180 rather.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's like, you know what? The people who had reserved it at the lower price, we can't even get dibs on the deal today because it's already gone. So I'm on the wait list for what that is worth. Probably nothing, but yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you should do is boycott Amazon and use the alternative, which is there isn't one, really. Yeah, you know, and the other thing that it makes it even more irksome, and I hate to make you feel more irked than you already are, is that the Amazon Echo is basically a cash register for buying things on Amazon. I mean, it's basically a tube that enables you to funnel money into Amazon's coffers, and they wouldn't even let you have it at a discounted price. So, oh, man, good old Amazon. Well, let's jump right into the news. We have some great guests for you today, so let's get started. After the scandal-packed departure on July 10th of Reddit interim CEO Ellen Pao, the company was taken over by co-founder Steve Huffman, who will host an AMA tomorrow to describe and defend, presumably, a new content policy for users. Lauren Hawkinson is a reporter for The Next Web and joins us to talk about this. Welcome to the show, Lauren.
Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. I'm nervous about tomorrow's AMA. It's going to be heated, no doubt. Huffman wrote that he and his co-founder, Alexis Ohanian, didn't create Reddit to be a bastion of free speech, but instead as a place where open and honest discussion can happen. But doesn't open and honest discussion require free speech? What's the difference between these hairs that he's splitting?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the Redditors would say, it's time to either pop your popcorn or sharpen your pitchforks, depending on how you feel about free speech. So the way that it works is that a lot of Redditors have sort of anecdotally, in a common knowledge, believe that Reddit is around to promote free speech. And that means that free speech that you don't like can be on Reddit also. This has led to the subreddits like r Coontown and r Gas the Kikes. Things that really aren't necessarily polite or inclusive.
They're horrible. They're horrible and offensive. And you listed a couple of them. There are dozens or maybe even hundreds.
Oh, yes, there are so many, but the way that Reddit has often treated them is the idea that if you quarantine them, they're allowed to have their free speech, just like anybody who's on, you know, R Funny can have their free speech. But it's actually very interesting because they've really been toying with the idea of having a content policy or some kind of content regulation in some time. Actually, former CEO Ellen Pao took the heat for banning 5 subreddits, including the incredibly toxic R Fat People Hate. In the process, a lot of people were kicking and screaming about her decision and said that she was interested in policing free speech. Now that she has left the company and co-founder Steve Huffman has taken her place, it looks like this content policy issue is actually coming up again. So Steve Huffman has really said that that neither he nor Alexis intended it to be about free speech, and that it's really time for Reddit to start really seriously thinking about the content that's on the site.
Hey, Lauren, it's Kevin Toffel. Good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a
Hi.
few months since we worked
I
together.
know.
Yeah,
I
so
know.
this is like a mess. I mean, we've had the Reddit revolt and so on, and there's been a firing and a changing of the guard here. But it's a tricky situation. When Reddit built itself as one of the largest forums on the web, they kind of have lost control, and now they're trying to reel it back in, and it's very difficult to regain control of something like this once it's already out there. So, I mean, what are you expecting Huffman to say tomorrow when he does his call? I mean, do you think he's going to ban more subreddits or defend the practice even more, what he's doing, or what do you think?
I think that that's really interesting. I mean, the way that I sort of think about Reddit is that it is a corporate structure grafted onto like this anarchist forum syndicate. Really at the end of the day, that the users have control over Reddit. And we saw that back when Reddit revolted. I mean, mods can just shut down subreddits wholesale, and corporate admins can't get access to them and can't get them live again. So what you really see is users have a lot of control over a lot of parts of the site. And I think that Steve Huffman really has a tough job ahead of him, especially in this AMA, which he's obviously humbly bringing to users because he really can't do it any other way. I would expect to see that they're going to try to institute some kind of hardline policy against outward harassment, which was what a lot of the subreddits that Ellen Pao initially banned were faulty of, but also probably there might be something really deeper about, the idea of really banning very, very toxic Reddits or subreddits, or basically just saying, like, if you don't like it, probably you should leave.
Yeah, the thing that I find really interesting about this is really the problem is that Reddit has become kind of mainstream. I mean, they had, one of the founders of Reddit, Ohanian, on the Colbert Report, for example. It's a pretty mainstream site these days, and it gets a lot of media attention when people start digging around and finding out what people are saying, what the names of the subreddits are. It's shocking that a somewhat well-known brand like Reddit has that kind of content. But of course, free speech, theoretically, includes a legal tolerance for incredibly offensive speech. In fact, it's been said before that only offensive speech needs to be protected. Happy speech, speech that everybody likes, does not really need constitutional protections. So it looks like there's going to be a crackdown. It looks like a lot of people are going to be unhappy. Where can the racists and the sexists and the haters go after they're driven out of Reddit, assuming they are going to be?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So a lot of Redditors have been looking towards a website called Vote, which is very similar to the way that Reddit works. It looks very much the same, although Vote founders have said that it's not, the Reddit's code source is actually open, so anybody can actually take Reddit's source code and do whatever they want with it and create whatever they want with it. This is a completely different site with a completely different programming language, but essentially it is super hardline on free speech. So actually that's where the 5 banned subreddits already exist, is on Vote. But the issue with Vote is that in the tumultuous times that Reddit is having, it's also having tumultuous times from a technological perspective. The great thing about Vote is you can say what you want as long as the website is live. And it's not live very often.
I see. Yeah, right. Exactly. They need performance. They need revenue, and so does Reddit. Lauren, are you a Reddit fan? And if so, what are your favorite subreddits?
That's actually a really good question. I have been a Redditor for some time, and I'm kind of dabble in a lot of different places. I mean, it's hard not to stay away from places like our funny GIFs or our frugal, because I'm a poor person and really enjoy learning how to save money. Our fitness has really good tips on how to take care of yourself. There are just so many places on Reddit that are really nice and great and exciting and useful, and have a lot of people who are actively contributing great and thoughtful knowledge or inspirational posts. But that said, there are a lot of places on there that really aren't so great. So it's tough. It's, a lot of people love what Reddit can be and what parts of Reddit are. But a lot of people hate what Reddit tolerates and have a hard time reconciling the two.
Yeah. And of course, there is the greatest subreddit of all, which is r Tech News Today. Well, Lauren Hawkinson, you can find Lauren at thenextweb.com and on Twitter at @LHawkinson. Thanks for joining us today, Lauren.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Lauren.
We've got some really interesting news for you coming up in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about Prosper. Prosper, of course, is a great way, the only modern way to borrow money. You can borrow up to $35,000 in as few as 5 days and use the money for any number of things. Of course, it's easy to imagine what you might use that money for. I mean, if you're watching this show, you're probably into technology. You might want to start a business. You hear about startups all the time. Well, there are a bunch of ways to go about doing it, but if it's a small startup, you can raise the money on Prosper with a loan, and that way you don't have investors and you don't have to share the benefits of your business once you're up and running. It's a great way to go. And of course, you can imagine also fixing up your bathroom or your kitchen or, upgrading your house in some way. But here's a really good idea that lots and lots of people are doing on Prosper. They're consolidating their credit cards and they're paying off the high interest credit cards that they have, which is just a great, smart thing to do because you'll get a lower interest loan from Prosper, and paying off those high interest credit cards means just money in your pocket, and it enables you to improve your credit at the same time. The process for getting a loan on Prosper is super easy. There are only 3 steps. Number 1, you create your loan listing. You just go to the website and you create a listing. Number 2, investors commit funds to your loan so that the commitments start coming in. And number 3 is the easiest one of all. You get your money and then you spend it on your project. It's just a great way to borrow money. Don't rack up more debt on your credit cards. You want to pay them off with a loan from Prosper. And now for a limited time, Prosper is offering Twit viewers and listeners a $50 Visa gift card with your low interest loan. You can get up to $35,000 in your account in as few as 5 days, plus a $50 Visa gift card. So go to prosper.com/twit for this special offer for people like you who love Twitch shows. Well, a new Pew study says that Facebook and Twitter are growing as a source of news. This growth is not driven by new users, interestingly enough, but by new behavior from existing users. Pew found that 63% of people on Facebook and Twitter said they use the sites to learn about current events. Philip Bump writes for the Washington Post and joins us now to talk about this. Welcome to you, Philip.
Thank you very much.
So glad you're here. Now, most journalists probably believe that everybody gets their news from Twitter, but how do Facebook and Twitter actually compare as news sources for Americans?
It's pretty staggering. What Pew found is that it was actually more than 40% of U.S. adults get news, not all of their news necessarily, but get news from Facebook, whereas only 10% get news from Twitter, which, yes, as a member of the media, it's sort of hard to believe, but sometimes the media apparently exists in a bubble. But it's a pretty staggering finding, and not only that, but they found that since they did the survey in 2013 across every single demographic group, the percentage of people that said they got news through Facebook was up, usually substantially.
Philip, both of these platforms are pretty much mainstream, as you've just noted, and they also make it very easy to share news or other content. Do we have any data or any ideas on the comparison on engagement between these two platforms?
Yeah, so they looked specifically, I write generally about politics, so the numbers jumped out to me when you talk about news about government and politics. Substantially more engagement on Facebook as a percentage of usage than on Twitter. So in other words, if you sat 2 people down, one of them on Twitter, one of them on Facebook, they're a lot more likely to actually like a politician or a news story or a bit of information about politics. They were more likely to comment on something on Facebook. They were a lot more likely to share information on Facebook about government and politics than they were on Twitter.
Philip, you wrote that the next election will be a Facebook election. You wrote something like that. I don't recall your exact words. But is that because of the news that's being shared in news feeds, or is it because of advertising, political ads, or is it because of campaign activity? Why do you think the next election is going to be a Facebook election?
Sure. I think it's the first 2 of those 3. I think that the fact that so many people get news at Facebook, the fact that Facebook is being so aggressive in trying to get people to share news, on Facebook, including from media outlets, means that you have this giant pool of folks, all of whom have enormous demographic information associated with them because we all tell them how old we are and what gender we are and what we like and what we don't. This massive resource of a news site that has demographics is going to be invaluable to campaigns as they're figuring out where to advertise. And at the same time, Facebook has made huge strides in getting people to be fine with having videos on their Facebook feed. You know, they've seen enormous growth in the use of video on Facebook feeds. And they have done a very good job of reaching out to campaigns to say, hey, you can target very specific demographic groups right in their Facebook feeds with an ad that is already playing. And that puts them in very, very good, it sizes up very well against, for example, cable news or broadcast news ad buys where the demographic targeting is far less specific.
Philip, I realize you write specifically about political news and such, so you may not have this information, but I'm curious about how much engagement and or usage of the news on these platforms is really coming through mobile. Are you guys seeing, can you measure that? And are you seeing that type of numbers that would indicate more people using mobile devices than desktop for this type of news consumption?
It's a great question, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I think that it is broadly understood. You know, the Washington Post obviously does a lot of content that we produce. God bless Washington Post, but we have a lot of visitors on mobile. I think everyone is seeing across the board the use of mobile increasing, and one of Facebook's big challenges when it first had its IPO, as I'm sure everyone who's listening knows, was how they're going to be able to expand into mobile. I think they've done that very effectively. I think that's generally the consensus. And campaigns are increasingly trying to focus on how they can actually use mobile effectively for their voter outreach.
And speaking of using mobile effectively, doesn't the Washington Post have a new app for news?
We do, as a matter of fact. We have a new iOS app. It's so we had one for the Kindle because obviously we are owned by Amazon. So I was not sure my thoughts on Prime Day, but we have a new iOS app that uses the same sort of story display system as using the Kindle. It's actually a much easier way to read stories, I think, than just through the website.
And just to clarify, you are owned by Jeff Bezos personally, rather than Amazon, the genius billionaire who also, by the way, has a space program. He does what he wants. Philip Bump, I want to thank you so much for coming on today. Philip Bump is at thewashingtonpost.com and on Twitter at pbump. Thanks again, Philip.
Great, thank you.
All right. The Television Academy, which organizes the Emmys every year, is partnering with Google to stream Emmy candidate content to voting members. Deborah Birnbaum is the executive editor for TV for Variety. Thank you so much for joining us today, Deborah.
Thanks for having me.
So glad you're here. Now, why is the TV Academy doing this? It seems like they had a good system going. Why change it with a partnership with Google?
Well, this was really driven by the rules changes for this year. Basically, what happened is they do a second round of voting. So once the nominations are out, the voting in the second round. In years past, it used to just be for a blue ribbon panel of elite Emmy voters. This time around, for the second round of voting, it's going out to all the Academy members. So the Academy had to figure out a way to get all of that content to basically 18,500 members of the Academy. So in a way to figure out how to get all of that content, all of those series, all of those TV shows out to those thousands of members, they were searching for a digital partner, and they teamed up with Google as the best solution for that.
Yeah, Deborah, I wanted to ask about them choosing Google over other competitors here, such as Apple. I mean, you had mentioned that Google was kind of chosen because of, from an impartiality standpoint. Is it because Google is a more open platform, open source, available on multiple devices and such, or was it some other reason that they partnered with Google?
Yeah, they said they'd already been having conversations with Google on a number of fronts, and I think one of the reasons that stood out to them was definitely its impartiality. I think when they're faced with figuring out who the best partner is, a lot of the technology providers they already had been talking to are already content providers. They wanted to make sure that whoever this person was going to be, this partner was going to be, was someone that wasn't already creating content. Because look, in this space, everyone's trying to get into the content game. So when they're looking at someone who's going to be delivering content to the Emmy voters, they want to make sure it's not somebody who's already in the content game.
So trying to get a sense of the scope of this, how many voting members are they, and will all of these voting members get a Chromecast, and will they get to keep it?
Yes, so there are 18,500 voting members of the Academy, and they're all going to get to keep their Chromecast dongles, as they're calling them, after voting ends. So yeah, I mean, it's a great benefit to the voting members of the Academy, and any new member that joins is going to get one as well.
So it's a little perk, and they're also very small, and they can be easily mailed. Kevin, did you have another question?
Well, yeah, I was just thinking from a cost perspective, aside from the logistics of getting the content out to everybody all at one time. I mean, this has to be cheaper than sending or producing DVDs and sending those and so on. You're just sending a $35 dongle, and I'm wondering if that had any decision or reason for this decision. It's got to save the money to the Academy.
Oh, absolutely. It's a far more cost-effective solution, and it's definitely much more environmentally friendly as well. And one of the other reasons they brought up too is it's a piracy solution as well. They figured, given all of the mailings that would have to go out, this definitely prevent, the content from getting pirated as well.
Very interesting. Deborah Birnbaum is at Variety.com and on Twitter at Deborah Birnbaum, unsurprisingly. Thank you so much for joining us today, Deborah.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right. A feature on Recode by Mark Bergen and Kurt Wagner went into detail about where the current trend of deep learning at Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and other companies actually came from. Kurt Wagner joins us to talk about it. Welcome to you, Kurt Wagner.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing great now. I'm dying to know, what is this Canadian Mafia you're writing about, and what is the deep learning conspiracy?
Well, that's essentially what we wanted to find out as well. We, Mark covers Google, I cover Facebook. And the two of us started talking probably about a month ago, and we were like, gosh, we really need to understand what this deep learning stuff is that our companies are really involved in. And so we started interviewing and asking around, and we kept hearing the same three names come up, Jeffrey Hinton, Jan LeCun, and Yoshua Bengio. And these are deep learning experts, and LeCun is at Facebook, and Hinton's at Google, and Bengio is still teaching. And it seemed as if everyone in the industry had either studied under one of those three or knew one of those three closely. And so we thought, all right, well, these people are people that we need to get to know and find out about. So we started reporting that story, and this is ultimately what came out. And it's funny, they kind of refer to themselves jokingly, and other people have heard them call themselves the Canadian Mafia, which is a very intense name for such a group of smart scientist, geeky guys. So we thought that was pretty funny, and ultimately that was what we wanted to look into.
Kurt, we've talked about artificial intelligence and neural nets for years. I mean, is this deep learning, is it just another term for the same concept, the kind of thing that IBM's Watson has put into play, or is it something else?
No, I think that it's essentially the same thing. And I think that what's happened over the last probably 2 or 3 years is that these terms, deep learning, have kind of become a little bit more mainstream, whereas 10, 15 years ago, yes, people were working on this stuff, but no one really, understood. Maybe they understood the concept of teaching a machine to kind of think like a human being, but no one was. It wasn't there. The application wasn't actually there. And over the last few years, the actual technology has caught up with the concept. And so I think that that's why you're seeing companies like Facebook and Google and IBM and Twitter rush after all of these deep learning experts, because they realize all of a sudden the application can actually go into consumer products, and there's very few people out there who know how to do this kind of tech. So I think that's maybe why there's been a resurgence of it. But yes, this is very similar to the neural network stuff that we've maybe heard about in the past.
Where is deep learning already being applied in consumer-facing technology? I know we're already using it, but where are we using it exactly?
So I think maybe the most obvious and perhaps the most exciting example right now typically centers around photography and visuals. So, for example, Google's Photos app or Facebook has a new app called Moments. And what they're able to do is do facial recognition and also identify, certain images that maybe the computer hasn't been told what that image is. And so it's able to say, oh, I know that this is a dog because I've seen dogs in other photos, and therefore I can label it as such and help you organize your photos, help you kind of, label things. And I think that that's maybe where we're seeing this from a consumer standpoint right now. And you can see obviously how this could continue to evolve, not just with photos, but with video, obviously text. I could see, media organizations using this kind of thing to automate headlines or automate captions of photos. So there's a lot of applications for deep learning, but I think the photo stuff is probably the most relevant at the moment.
Kurt, I'm a big Ray Kurzweil fan, and I recall about 3 years ago, Google hired him to basically come in and create like a computerized brain. And I haven't heard anything new on what he's doing there. It's been really hush hush. And I'm wondering if, in your research, if you and Mark had found any news on what their progress is there at Google.
Oh man, I wish. Obviously, with the story, you know, we were hoping to kind of uncover some of the bigger projects, right? Like the moonshot types of projects that these companies have going on, and it's harder than you'd think. A lot of times, these people in the industry are kind of hesitant to talk about that kind of stuff because they know that it's not necessarily going to be successful. They know that it could be 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So they don't necessarily want to talk about all of their research. So unfortunately, we didn't learn anything about that. But I think what we do know, or what we came away with feeling very comfortable about, was that this is going to be a big focus for all of these companies moving forward. So I think we can expect to see a lot of these use cases that we already mentioned kind of rolled in and looped in with products that companies are coming out with over the next few years.
All right, Kurt Wagner, always a pleasure. Kurt Wagner's at recode.net and on Twitter at KurtWagner8. Thanks again for joining us today, Kurt.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much.
All right, take care. Well, Commodore sold 17 million Commodore 64 PCs before the company went bankrupt in 1994. Now, 2 Italian entrepreneurs have acquired the rights to the brand in 38 countries and are resurrecting it for a new smartphone. The phone is called the Commodore PET. Not making this up, folks. The phone is a custom build of Android, and it has 2 emulators for playing Commodore 64 and Amiga games. Kevin Toffel, this is, of course, as many of these things are, pretty shameless. People have heard of the Commodore brand, and they're just milking that brand, which they had nothing to do with, to sell some pretty mediocre smartphones. But I like the fact that they have this little homage to the whole genre with these old arcade games.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have one of those 17 million Commodore 64 still in working order in my basement.
Wow.
And, yeah, so there's some nostalgia there with the brand. You know, on the surface, that's pretty much what this is. This is a play to use the Commodore branding on, I consider it like a mid-range phone. It's going to cost between $300 and $365. I may just get one just for the nostalgia factor. I mean, you can actually get the emulators on the Google Play Store now, so you don't even need to buy this phone to go play old Commodore 64 or Amiga games and such. But I still think it's kind of interesting, you know, from a historical perspective. I mean, Commodore, you can't think about personal computers or the history of personal computing without thinking about the Commodore 64, the VIC-20, the PETs, and the Amiga, and so on. So, you know, it's more of a throwback retro branding on a mid-range phone, but it's a little nostalgic for me.
And of course, this phone, even though it's a mid-range phone, is vastly more powerful than the Commodore 64. I'm curious, do you have a tape drive for your Commodore 64 in the basement?
You know, I had the old cassette drive. I remember listening to the programs I used to create because you could do that back in the day. But I upgraded to the old C1541 floppy drive, which is the size of a shoebox. And I have the original Commodore monitor as well. I think it was the 1701. Scary that I can still remember those model numbers.
Yeah, my first computer was actually a Commodore 64. I had a tape drive, and I plugged it into a black and white TV, and that's where I discovered something very important about myself, which is that I have no interest in software development. I wrote a couple of programs. I wasn't very good at it. I didn't really like it very much, and that's when I realized, you know what? I'm going to do other stuff instead of write software.
I'm completely different. I would sit around all summer and between school years, and I would peek and poke into memory on that Commodore and create games and whatnot. It was just such a blast.
Yeah. Oh, there's the Commodore PET on screen.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Well, in product update news, Apple updated the iPod today. The iPod Touch product got the biggest overhaul of all, gaining an 8-megapixel camera and M8 coprocessor. The M8 enables the kind of fitness tracking you can do with an iPhone. The iPod Touch ranges in price from $199 for the 6-gigabyte version all the way up to a $400 price point for a brand new 128-gigabyte option. The Shuffle and Nano also got very minor upgrades. Kevin Toffel, in other news, the iPod still exists. What's going on here? Why do they keep this thing alive?
You know, I think there's a very good reason to keep it alive. And actually, I've mentioned one of those reasons on this show in the past. I still think one of the most disruptive features of Apple Music is that family plan. Well, you know, you need either an iPhone or eventually an Android phone to have that. There's a whole younger generation that isn't ready for a phone yet. But for $199, you can go get yourself or your kids rather, a new iPod Touch. It'll come pre-installed with Apple Music. You've got some other upgrades as well. I mean, this has the same processor as the iPhone 6. It has the A8 chip in it, so you know it's going to be able to run the 64-bit programs for years to come, or at least as long as Apple supports this device. So I think it's kind of clever. I really think it's all about Apple Music.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, although it has to be said that this phone-like product that isn't a phone is twice the price of many really good Android phones. So, but hey, you know, got to keep the kids quiet, keep them entertained, and if you're on the family plan, it's probably a good idea. Well, Google Drive today gained a better permission system. Now you can selectively lock downloading, printing, or copying of documents. Kevin, this is just a great feature. I like this a lot.
Yeah, more user control is always better, especially when it comes to Google stuff, because a lot of people have issues with using Google products and services. But yeah, I like this. I don't do a lot of things on Google Drive that would require me to lock them down, but I could see a lot of people that would want this.
Well, we got some more news for you coming right up. But first, I want to talk to you software developers out there. I know there are thousands of you in our audience, and I'm talking directly to you. You have to try Braintree, one of our sponsors today, for your mobile app or your website. It's used by some of the biggest companies in the industry, including Uber, which of course is a gigantic company. They are bigger than a decacorn being like a unicorn, but $10 billion value or more. They're far above that as well. But they started as a tiny, tiny company. And when they were tiny, they started using Braintree. And Braintree grew with them as they became this gigantic global organization. And they continue to use Braintree, of course, because that's part of their secret sauce. That's part of what makes Uber so simple and easy to use. And it makes the payments process just painless for Uber, painless for their customers, painless for the drive, painless for everybody. And that's what Braintree is really all about. And I mentioned they're global. Braintree takes more than 130 currencies, and they're on multiple platforms. They solve the problem of mobile cart abandonment because they make it so easy to spend money on your app or your service. People aren't going to wander away because it's just super fast and easy. They give you a full stack payment solution, support for all payment types that your customers might want, including PayPal, Apple Pay, Venmo, credit cards, of course, and even Bitcoin, all with a single integration. It's across all platforms, superior fraud protection, fast payouts, and really great customer service. To learn more and for your first $50,000 in transactions fee-free, go to braintreepayments.com/TNT. Well, in news, you can lose a new Android app called Red Bull Alert. Yeah, it's from the people who make Red Bull. It turns waking up into a competitive extreme sport. It keeps a leaderboard listing you and your friends in order of who gets up faster to turn off the alarm in the morning. You can also share your wake-up stats on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. Let's take a look at their promotional video. You can track your waking up performance, it says. A bunch of stats. Oh, the leader got up in 1.9 seconds. You can share and compare with your friends. Choose your favorite sports theme. Beat the snooze, it says. Red Bull Alert.
What's not to love?
What's not to love? Well, this app, for example, this is built by Red Bull Media House, which is the media wing of the energy drink company, and they make all kinds of stuff. They make TV shows, magazines, movies, books, music, and of course, they make mobile apps. Kevin Toffel, I just have zero interest in this. I don't want to be competitive in how fast I wake up, although I have to brag for a second. I'm not a snoozer. When that alarm goes off, I am getting up.
I am so much a snoozer. You will never. First of all, I won't download the app. But even if I did, you would never see me on this leaderboard. I can guarantee you that. Never.
Yeah, maybe they have a sort of snooze Hall of Fame or something like that you might be able to make. Well, anyway, terrible idea. Red Bull isn't disturbing people's sleep enough with their beverages. They thought they'd try an app. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Harold Mansfield in Las Vegas, Nevada. Harold is a bacon enthusiast. He's a whiskey connoisseur, and he obviously enjoys the finer things in life, which is why he watches Tech News Today while he's at work. And there it is in all its glory. We, of course, our audience has so many monitors. You take our audience, multiply it by 3, 4, or 5, and that's how many monitors are out there watching our show. Well, show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup and post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. Use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT so we can find it. Kevin Toffel, what are you working on these days?
For the next week over at ZDNet, I will be taking that brand new MacBook, the 12-inch MacBook, for a spin to see, super thin, huh?
Yeah.
To see how well it does or doesn't work for my mobile lifestyle, and we will see. A lot of people feel that it's underpowered and overpriced. I can certainly understand that, but it just arrived this morning, and I'm pretty impressed so far.
It's almost certainly overpriced, but we'll see if it's underpowered. I mean, you know, hey, I've got a MacBook, a significantly less thin one. And it's pretty nice, although lately I've been craving an Android. a Chromebook Pixel, but that's just me. I look forward to reading your review.
I was going to say that's my daily driver, the Chromebook Pixel, which is also very expensive. So to compare the two is going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Kevin Toffel. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. You can subscribe to Tech News Today on your favorite podcasting app. You can choose another way to subscribe at twit.tv/TNT. You can also watch us live every weekday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1700 UTC at twit.tv/live. You can also join our Google Plus community. You're certainly welcome there. Search Google Plus for Tech News Today, and you can find the community that way. You can follow me on all the social networks at elgin.com. And also, I want to invite you to watch our other news show, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific every single weeknight. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. This show is produced by Jason Cleanthes and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgin. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.